Welcome, everyone. My name is Kevin Fitzsimmons, and I'm the co-chair of the F3 team and a professor here at the University of Arizona, and your host for today's session. Thanks for joining us for Aquafeed Investors Funding the Future of Food. This is the last of our series of monthly webinars for 2021, and we're reporting on the latest advances in aquaculture feed ingredients to replace fish meal and fish oil. As we all know, wild-caught forage fish are a declining resource, and replacements are needed to future-proof aquaculture to feed a growing world population. Our webinars feature the latest in alternative ingredient innovation. Throughout our series, we've looked at numerous alternative ingredients, research and challenges for alternatives, and global trends in fish meal and fish oil replacement. Now we have asked Aquafeed investors to give us their perspective on investing in alternative ingredients. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that if you have any questions during the webinar, you can type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them during the question and answer session following the panelist presentations. Also, you should know that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will, the recording will be available along with recordings of all our previous webinars at f3meeting.com. So let's get started. Our first speaker is Matt Mulrennan. He's the CEO of Envest. Prior to joining Envest, Matt worked his way across the ocean sector, previously serving as a marine scientist for Oceana. He was a lab researcher for Scripps Institute of Oceanography, and also director for the X Prize Foundation. He is passionate about supporting entrepreneurs, innovators, and investors working to preserve the environment. And now at Envest, Matt helps connect top environmental investors with the most compelling environmental startups and investment opportunities. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about Envest invite-only events and opportunities for investors and ingredient companies. So Alex, would you please play the video?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Matt Mulrennan. I'm the CEO of Envest. We are an environmental investing membership organization. We host invite-only events for top environmental investors to see great deals, great environmental companies that are working on sustainability. So I'm going to try and recruit some of you to put your hats in the ring and potentially try to pitch at this year's annual summit. So why do we exist in general? We think that this whole decade is incredibly important within human history to try and transform our whole economy. We need people like you, environmental entrepreneurs, more than ever. So we focus on groups that are trying to reduce pollution, grow the environmental economy, including the blue economy. And we focus early stage. We do seed to Series B companies, but we really want the companies that are raising to be on par with software, biotech, healthcare, huge investment fields. So the environmental field is still pretty new, but there's a lot of opportunity happening in the space just in 2021 alone. A lot of launching of new funds. There's new $100 million funds launching, seems like every other week now. So we want to attract more people into this fold, as well as get the newcomers, the new environmental investors, to be learning from the people that have been in this space for a little bit. So like I mentioned, we're an investor membership organization. We try to focus on those early stage startups. So we do seed to Series B. We have a couple pre-seed companies. We've had a couple B+ companies, but within the ocean space, we've had a lot of great opportunities. We have at least 6 of our 36 companies that come through each year are focused on the oceans, including aquaculture, fisheries and oceans in general. So we've had a bunch of deals that have done quite well that have come through. We've had insect farms on the feed side. We've had kelp farming within the processing, the facilities, the aggregators, as well as some CPG food brands within kelp. Within finfish, we've had farm optimization. We've also had coastal monitoring as a service itself. And then we've had all the way up to alternative seafoods, plant-based, and cell-based seafoods as well. So a little bit of history on us. We've been around since 2017. Last year, we did go virtual on Hop-In. That was our first time doing it virtually, and it went quite well. So we've been designed by investors for the investors themselves. So this is a little different than other conferences you might see, but the investors have been really involved with vetting the companies, getting high quality investable companies for venture capitalists. So we do it very efficiently. It's a 24-hour event. We focus on the companies themselves. So they are the presenters and they're the main focus of the whole conference. And then we have a lot of networking for the investors themselves, sit down private dinners, receptions, etc. So we really want to hold ourselves to a higher standard here on the results of the conference, the main annual summit, as well as our organization as in general. So we want to make sure that we're getting money invested into these companies. They've done quite well. Since 2017, over $130 million through our network alone has been invested into the companies that have presented at Invest. Number two, the number of companies that are receiving investment after they come through, 75%. Of the companies that have come through, we've had over 100 companies come through. Over 75% of them have raised after they presented at Invest. And the number of investors that are returning to invest in subsequent years that find it to be beneficial for them and their network. So you can get involved if you'd like to. Right now, we have applications open for both the environmental investors and the presenting companies. You can request an invitation at invest.earth. We are planning it in person in San Francisco, barring anything crazy happening. Vaccinations are required to attend, and we'll be selecting those companies, those top 36 companies within the next month to actually come and present. So if you have any questions, feel free to ping me and look forward to chatting more.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate that. All right, next up is Alex Kaplan, who's the Senior Director and Partner at IndieBio. So this is a program of SOSV. And prior to joining IndieBio, Alex obtained his Doctor of Pharmacy and gained experience in clinical, global health, and startups. SOSV is a global venture capital firm providing multi-stage investment for 150 companies each year through startup development programs like IndieBio and HAX. IndieBio invests $525,000 as an initial investment for every company that goes through their program, with follow-on investments possible through additional growth funds. So let's hear more about IndieBio's program.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex, a partner at IndieBio and SOSV. First off, I want to thank F3 for having me on the panel. And now I'm going to dive in and share a little bit about us and our take on the future of food and aquaculture. So IndieBio is 6 years old, and we're part of SOSV, which is a global multi-stage VC. We funded about 160 companies in those 6 years. As IndieBio, SOSV itself has funded hundreds more through our other programs like HAX. And those companies span the future of food, novel biomaterials, human health, carbon negative companies. And right now, those 160 plus are worth about $6 billion combined. So we kind of start with the idea that there are three key trends in science that were driving this new opportunity. The first was something called the postdocalypse, which refers to a huge increase in the number of PhDs graduating every year that the traditional path in academia wasn't really available to. And then there was much faster and cheaper science being driven by advances in computation, novel hardware, sequencing, and other new tools. And that kind of leads to this phrase of read, write, copy, paste, learn, taken a bit from traditional tech, where a scientist can go through many more hypotheses and try many more experiments in their career as these tools get much faster and cheaper. And we fit in kind of in the funding world right after the huge amount of money that goes into academia for research. And but it's a challenge to jump into kind of raising your first VC round. So we give founders cash, about $500,000, as well as a lot of training and kind of the early stages of building a company on the science and business side. When it comes to food, we've done about 50 companies. I'm going to walk through some of the sectors of that now. The first is we're cell-based meats. We're some of the first investors there. Upside Foods is the first company in the world, went through our program. In the background, you can see a prototype of finless foods cell-based bluefin tuna, which also went through Indie Bio. We've done a lot with fermentation, so using microbes to make specific high-value proteins and ingredients. And we have companies making cheese without the cow, ice cream and dairy without the cow, egg white protein using microbes, as well as collagen using microbes. And also companies applying AI to new foods. The background is products from a company called Notco, our first unicorn, that has an AI engine to produce a bunch of different formulations of foods across the spectrum, including milk and burgers and ice cream. And in the bottom right, a company that could be relevant to aquaculture, actually, Proterra, have AI design of proteins and enzymes. And one example is they actually are replacing palm oil with a protein that makes, or an enzyme that makes olive oil stable at room temperature. We also work a lot in plants. So a company like Avalo that has a new technology to understand what genes result in complex traits in crops. And here we can use that to breed crops that are able to withstand heat and drought or make new or better proteins or other ingredients much, much faster and much cheaper. And then we also play in the microbiome. So a company like Pando Nutrition that is eliminating methane from cows using precision probiotics. And all these modalities kind of span the tree of life. And we like working with really kind of diverse platforms because there's actually a lot of overlap. And as we get better working with one, that helps us learn about the others and really be much more able to leverage all these technologies and platforms. And we see kind of our companies in this kind of tree as well. And some of the key ingredients I'd say first is the people. So passionate, great scientists, entrepreneurs, and then the other is a great problem they're trying to solve. So we often talk about in human and planetary health, we want to affect 1 billion+ people or $1 billion markets. And in aquaculture, there's a lot there. First, Nova Nutrients, the company taking CO2 emissions and using that to actually feed a consortium of bacteria that can be protein as well as a lot of high-value feed ingredients, like carotenoids for aquaculture. And they're have a partner in the next year or two to scale their first facility and looking for other partners, both for the CO2 offtake as well as the protein offtake. A company like Proteinia is a new twist on insect protein. And here they're out of Egypt. They're actually using the black soldier fly as a carrier that they can engineer to make human and animal medicines and vaccines. And relevant to aquaculture, they actually have a pilot coming up for a shrimp vaccine that's going to be expressed in the black soldier fly larva. Microbiome out of Argentina uses a fungi platform. On the bottom left, you can see they make a deep red, which they're actually looking at in aquaculture as a replacement to astaxanthin because it's a natural red, has a deep color for the meat, and then it also is an antioxidant. And then the mycoprotein itself is a really rich amino acid profile they're looking at for plant-based products as well as feed for animals. Biofane is a company applying human medicine ideas into aquaculture, and they are focused on nano-encapsulation, so delivery of high-value ingredients as well as medicines. So here to ensure better absorption and availability, which leads to the animal being healthier, a better end product, less waste, and less ingredients needed. Blue Planet Ecosystems is a pretty different take. They're on land, multi-trophic aquaculture. So building systems where they operate best in areas that are non-arable and have a lot of sunlight to feed the algae, which then go to feed lower levels of higher value aquatic life. Similar vertical oceans, they're in-city vertical towers making shrimp at a really, really high efficiency and sustainability. And jumping to a few quick trends before I wrap up. The first, there's a lot of hype and money flowing into alt proteins. It's an area we've done a lot of work in, but we also see that we still have to feed nearly 8 billion people, and we need animal agriculture. And there's a lot of ways we can make that much more sustainable, ethical to both the animals and for the human workers in the chain. So we want to improve that in just all these industries quite a bit. The second is for entrepreneurs thinking about their business model. Investors typically want to have companies that own end products instead of ingredients. So thinking of how you can build a business model that captures as much value as possible when you're squeezing into someone else's end product, oftentimes. And then lastly, here as a trend, within aquaculture, it's a really international industry, both in its production and consumption. So we think it needs a different DNA founder type than a lot of tech tends to have. And that means cross-cultural experience and competence, really being able to get really broad consumer preferences and navigating long, complex supply chains. So we're really interested in the space in general of oceans and looking at kind of some of the sectors on the left, like ecosystem restoration, carbon negative and waste to value products, ocean bioprospecting, fully integrated systems, as well as bringing medical precision to food. And please feel free to get in touch with me. You can find my info on the bottom right.
Thank you. We appreciate that, Alex. Okay, next up is Lisa Rich, who's the founder and managing partner for Hemisphere Ventures. Lisa is a successful serial entrepreneur, investor, strategist, and communicator. In addition to founding Hemisphere Ventures, she also founded Explore, a commercial space exploration company. Hemisphere Ventures is an early-stage venture capital firm focused on frontier tech, including synthetic biology, robotics, drones, and space. They've invested in 200 plus US companies since 2014. Investments are in seed to state B companies and range from $200,000 to $1 million. Let's hear about Hemisphere's investment strategies and experience in the alternative protein space.
Ventures is a frontier technology firm. We invest in synthetic biology, robotics, drones, and the space industry. And in our view, all of these areas intersect. We define as cellular agriculture, future food tech, and protein design. So these fields, these emerging areas, are so important for the sustainability of our food chain, the safety, food safety and security in the future. Hemisphere has been involved in this for many, many years. So we have some of the first movers working in frontier tech. The criteria for Hemisphere Ventures investments involves a combination of previously siloed capabilities. So a roboticist sitting next to a data scientist, sitting next to a biologist, can create data sets and outcomes that, in our view, would allow for a company to achieve many, many goals and likely have many, many verticals so that there's a compounded outcome. So we go with your traditional venture analyses that people talk about: team, timing, technology. All of those things are always important. But for us, we're an emerging marketplace and traction is very key. And for traction, we mean the ability for the company to think about early revenues and think about how they will sustain themselves financially if investors are not there to back them. You know, they have to think about, what is my revenue stream? How can I be creative about earning early revenue, even if my long-term plan is to develop something that's very complicated and that will take many years down the road. A key factor with our investments as well is, do they have the ability to disrupt the marketplace or create an entirely new marketplace? And so we're really looking for very big ideas. We're not interested in companies that are going to just slightly enhance something that currently exists, but attack a whole new category that doesn't exist, that can change our benefits down the road and benefit humanity. So vertical marketplaces I've covered, and this all speaks to building out a future economy. You know, we want to change the way the status quo exists today. We want to change the way we have waste in our environments. We have waste in our supply chain. So all of these little characteristics factor into how we make our investments, and every company we invest in has to meet all of these criteria. Homeless Foods is creating fish, specifically bluefin tuna cell cultures, with the goal of supplying bluefin tuna without killing the whole population through cellular agriculture, a way to grow the cells, premium tuna cells, that will have the full nutritional value and actually have an enhanced nutritional value because they did not have the mercury from the oceans. They do not have pollutants. That allows us to literally grow it locally and not have, you know, fishing fleets and processing centers and that whole long time delay and cost of acquiring the product that ends up on our plate. I think it's something like 80% of the fish is waste compared to what ends up on our plate when we eat fish. And so they disrupt all of that by only growing for food. This is just a pure way of just growing what we need locally, having the freshest fish you could have and the most, the most nutritionally viable bluefin tuna that maybe is even better than what we get in the ocean today. With regard to our requirement for them to have early stage revenue, the company was really brilliant to make a vegan bluefin sashimi. There are some companies that are using traditional proteins that we're all familiar with, the wheat, the soy, the pea proteins, which are often gritty. The taste is not neutral. It may not achieve the texture and quality of, replicating the taste of a delicate fish. And so Finless took on this challenge that can be put into many different foods in a restaurant quality food. I have encouraged all of our companies to think about how their cellular agriculture capabilities can apply to our need to grow food in space, because we have astronauts on the International Space Station. We've seen the Inspiration 4 mission recently where they were orbiting the Earth for 3 days. Well, what did they eat, right? So we have to be thinking about more people living and working in space. And so they aligned with a 3D bioprinting company, sent the cells to the International Space Station, and by that partnership, produced the world's first fish cakes made with the bioprinter on the space station. We have to be sustainable. We shouldn't just be thinking about caring for Mother Earth. We need to be thinking about caring for our lives as we move beyond Earth and operate on space stations in the future. We tell every company that whether they know it or not, they are a space company. It's just a matter of time. My challenge to Fortune 100 companies here in the United States is to be asking them, what is your space strategy? Because it's almost like the internet, where we had companies sitting on the sidelines and saying, I don't know if that's a thing. It is the next wave of economy growth, I believe. And so I think every company should be thinking about a space strategy and what will their business look like in the future. We have a website. It's simple. It's hemisphere.com. And actually on that site, you can read about this story I'm telling about the fish on the International Space Station.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate that. Okay, just as a reminder for everybody, if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them during the question answer session here shortly. So moving on, our next speaker is Sho Chen. She's a senior agricultural analyst for Tianfeng Securities. Sho specializes in aquaculture, livestock, poultry industry research, and secondary market investment analysis. Tianfeng Securities is fully licensed national comprehensive listed securities company with research covering 2,237 A-share listed companies and 406 overseas listed companies. According to Wind Information, Tianfeng's research reports have ranked first in the industry in terms of total reading and comprehensive influence. We look forward to hearing their findings about aquaculture and aquafeed trends in China. Note that this presentation will be narrated in Chinese, but with English subtitles, and we have already posted the English versions of the PowerPoint slides at f3meeting.com. So let's go ahead and hear from Sho Chen, please.
大家好，我是那个天风证券的研究所的陈潇。那非常感谢这个水产前沿的邀请，来给大家做这样的一个专业的分享。那我今天重点想跟大家交流的题目是从资本市场的角度看中国水产业的一个趋势和机遇。那我们首先其实想跟大家重点的讲一下，中国水产业其实跟全球其他国家的一个水产业其实有一个很重要的一个区别，它其实有3个非常明显的一个特点。第一个来讲的话，就是面积其实相对来讲的话是比较有限的，限制中国水产养殖产业的发展很重要的一个问题就是在于面积是不太够的。那第二个特点就是在于其实我们会发现，由于大家的消费习惯是不同的，那不同的区域它的一个气候特点也是不一样的，所以整个中国的水产养殖它的区域属性其实是非常强的。那这也是中国水产业的第2个特点。那第3个特点来讲的话，这也是区别于中国水产也是区别于中国其他的一些养殖产业，比如说生猪养殖，比如说禽类养殖当中一个非常重要的特点，就是在于水产它本身是具有非常强的一个季节性的。那这个季节性来讲的话，比如说对于鱼的一个养殖来讲的话，在国内基本上来讲是从2、3月份开始投苗，然后一直养到10月份左右，那也是意味着基本上每一年的1季度整个塘内的鱼其实是非常少的。那这个其实是中国水产业非常明显的一个季节性。那有了这3个非常重要的就是与生俱来的这样一个特点，它其实也给整个产业链提供了一些破局的思路。那我梳理了一下，基本上是包括3个特点。第一个来讲的话，水面非常有限，那我们未来只能够通过增加单亩的养殖效率去提升整个的一个产量。那第2个就是区域性，那怎么去打破区域性？其实非常简单的一个事情就是做物流，怎么样去做很好的一个冷链的一个物流，去做到一个跨区域的一个调整和平衡。第3个来讲的话就是季节性，季节性其实其他的一个产业赛道给我们了很多经验，比如说做一些深加工的禽类的、生猪类的、水产类的这样的一些产品，其实都是解决它季节性储存时间短的一个很重要的一个特点。那除了这个整个中国水产业与生俱来的这样一个3个特点之外的话，那对于整个消费端，其实我们也能够发现这几年对于中国整个内部的一个蛋白消费结构其实也发生了非常大的一个变化。之前我们其实是以猪肉为主要的一个消费蛋白的，但是2018年以来，非洲猪瘟这样一个疫情的爆发，其实会使得猪肉的一个占比在下降的这样一个趋势。那它其实给这个优质的蛋白，比如说水产，它提供了一个非常好的一个机遇。那同时呢，我们也能够看到，包括这个菜酸菜鱼啊，包括这个小龙虾这样的一些品牌，其实在餐饮端的一个崛起的趋势，其实是非常强的。那这种内部的一个结构升级，其实它也推动了整个产业上游的一个升级。我们能够看到酸菜鱼也好，小龙虾也好，它其实整个的一个行业发展的规划其实是非常快的。那基本上来讲的话，都是有这个1年1倍左右的这样的一个市场翻倍的空间在。那除了这个消费端的这样的一个影响之外的话，其实我们也能够看到消费的一个升级，它促进上游的一个升级，它带来的一个很重要的特点就是在于特种水产，也就是说我们平时所讲的这个名特优的这样的一些水产品，它其实整体是在不断的替代普通水产，比如说替代草鱼、这个罗非鱼这样的一些品种。那在这个过程当中的话，其实原来比如说早在就是90年代或者80年代，这个事情其实想都是不敢想的。但这几年其实由于种苗啊、工业饲料啊、养殖技术这样的一些等等的一些这个技术手段的一个突破，其实我们能够发现，现在特水替代普水、特水实现这样的一个养殖，其实已经基本上来讲的话，其实是非常成熟的这样一个技术了。所以这个其实也给整个行业的空间打开和升级奠定了一个非常好的一个思路。那对于我们来讲的话，其实作为投资者，作为2级市场的一个投资者来讲的话，其实我们需要就是去区分不同赛道的一个特质，来看水产赛道本身的一个特质有哪些特点， 那这个其实也是它这个赛道到底有没有投资性价比的一个非常重要的一个原因。那我这边其实是放了2张图，大家从这2张图当中其实也能够很好的看出来，水产养殖这个赛道跟畜禽养殖这个赛道有哪些非常重要的一个区别。那首先第一个就是水产养殖它本身的养殖的特性，它水产品本身的一个生物学特性就决定了它在中国整体养殖不太具备，或者说是具备有限的规模经济。那中国目前的水产养殖，大家也可以看到，整体来讲的话，其实它的一个集中度其实不高的，目前还是以这个分散的这样的一些这个养殖户为主的。那这样分散的一个状态，就决定了它在整个产业链的价值分配当中，处在这样一些分散状态的养殖户的下游，比如说这个饲料，比如说动保这样的一些这个产业节点，它的一个话语权其实是相对比较强的。那同时在整个产业链的价值分配当中，这样一些节点它整体的一个价值分配相对来讲的话，占比也是相对比较高的。这个是整个中国水产产业链的一个特点。那第二个来讲的话，就是我们去对比畜禽养殖。畜禽养殖来讲的话，在中国这几年发展最快的一点，也是大家印象最深的一点，就是资本的涌入给整个畜禽产业链带来的一个快速的一个规模化提升。那目前来讲的话，其实在整个快速提升过程当中，整个上游的一个农资产品，比如说饲料，比如说动保，它相对于养殖本身的话语权，其实比水产当中其实要弱很多的。所以这个其实是2个赛道非常重要的一个区别。那区分开这个水产养殖和畜禽养殖的一个特点来讲的话，其实我们重要的是要挖掘水产这个赛道当中的有一些哪些可以值得，或者说哪些可以突破的这样的一些投资机会。那我们梳理了整个水产这个产业链的一个上游、中游、下游的这样的一些产业节点。其实我们能够其实产业节点也是非常多的。那中间环节的话就是养殖为核心，那上游的话更多的是一些农资配套。那农资配套当中其实又包括种苗、饲料这样的农资，还有水产动保。那饲料上游其实又包括大宗原材料的一些配套的这样的一些这个产业节点。那对于中游往下来看的话，就是下游的一个流通，那包括这个农批、餐饮、加工这样的一些这个渠道，那也包括在整个过程当中需要一个非常强的一个物流支撑。这样的一个环节来看的话，总体来讲的话，其实我们可以看出来，上游的处在水产养殖上游的这样的一些这个产业链节点，其实对于这个消费者来讲的话，它更重要的需求其实是要看产品力和服务的。那只有当它形成了一个非常好的一个产品力和服务的一个联合的一个这个强壁垒之后，它对于整个这个行业其他竞争对手的进入，它才能够会形成一个比较高的一个行业的一个壁垒。那对于下游来讲的话，其实更多的是要关注到整个产业的一个消费趋势和相应的一个品牌效应。所以这个其实是整个产业链梳理之后，上游和下游其实它的整体的一个痛点或者是解决的一个需求点，其实是有很大区别的一个非常重要的一个特点。那对于这个整个水产业当中，我们用2个维度去给大家做一个这样的一个梳理。那第一个维度的话，就是在于这个景气度。这个行业它目前所处的一个景气周期到底是什么样的水平？那第2个指标的话，就是在于这个行业的一个竞争格局，到底是怎么样一个水平？那我们把现在对于2级市场来讲关注度相对比较高的这样一些细分赛道进行了一个象限的一个划分。那在这个划分的过程当中，其实建议大家重点去关注的是第一象限的这样的一些景气向上，那同时整体的一个景气度集中度其实也是相对比较高的，竞争格局相对比较好的这样的一些赛道。那这样的一些赛道其实主要是聚焦在一些特种水产鱼的这个农资配套的一个饲料当中。那比如说现在这几年大家发展非常多的这个加州鲈鱼或者黄鳝鱼、虾料这样的一些品种，其实是第一象限当中我们认为投资的一个性价比其实相对比较高的这样一些品种。那对于这个其次来讲的话，也建议大家关注一些这个目前虽然这个行业是相对比较分散的，就还没有出现一家独大的这样的一些局面， 但整体的一个景气度仍然是非常向上的这样一些赛道。比如说这个整体的一个下游的水产的流通、深加工，那上游的一个种苗和动保，现在来讲的话，虽然就是说这个整体的一个集中度是非常分散的，但是整个的一个所处的这个位置的景气度其实还是非常高的。那对于这个整个的象限的第4象限的话，其实还是提示大家谨慎的去做这样一个投资，因为整体中国的一个产业升级、消费升级的过程当中，在水产当中非常重要的一个特点就是在于特种水产去替代普通水产。那对于普通水产，无论是它的养殖也好，水产料也好，它其实从历史上去复盘，基本上来讲的话都是一个周期品。那在目前的这个阶段来讲的话，其实对于他们来讲，长期的发展空间，我们其实也是有一定的担忧的。所以在这部分的这个象限的这样的一些投资赛道的话，其实还是提示大家可以谨慎的这个做这样的一个投资的一个决断。这个是整个的一个水产业当中我们认为就是相对比较好的这样的一些这个投资的一个赛道的一个情况。那对于这个中国水产链总结来讲的话，其实它的一个投资我们觉得可以分为3类。第一类的话就是说稳定的去增长的，这个其实是符合大家这个收益率的，这个其实是根据大家的一个收益率的一个特点做出这样的一个划分。那第一点来讲的话，就是说稳定增长型的。第二个来讲的话，就是这个周期的一个交替型的这样的一些赛道。第三个来讲的话，就是新兴导入型的这样的一个赛道。那对于稳定增长型的赛道来讲的话，其实我们重要的是要关注这样的一些品种的一个增长的一个持续性和稳定性。那包括它未来有没有这样的一些跨品种的能力和竞争格局有没有发生一个恶化，这个其实是这个赛道当中非常重要的一个关注指标。那目前来看的话，这样的一些这个投资特点来讲的话，基本上都是包括一些特种水产的一个饲料，包括一些水产的一个动保和种苗这样的一些这个情况。那在这一类的一个投资标的上来讲的话，其实提示大家重点还是可以选择一些龙头，因为整个龙头在整个的一个竞争格局当中，它基本上还是有一定的定价权和抗风险的一个能力的。其实长期来讲的话，其实是可以实现一个时间框空间的一个增长。那第二个来讲的话，其实就是周期的一个交替型。那周期交替型的这样一些标的来讲的话，更重要的是要把握整个周期的一个变化。但是长期来讲的话，这样的一个赛道它不一定会实现一个非常好的一个长期的一个成长的收益比，但是通过这个波段的一个选择，可以实现一个短期或者中期的这样的一个弹性。那这部分来讲的话，主要是目前已经有非常明显的周期表现的这样的一些这个水产养殖的一个鱼品，比如说这个传统的家鱼这样的一些鱼品来讲的话，其实很重要的就是周期交替型的这样的一些投资的一个逻辑。那第三点来讲的话，就是新兴的一个导入型。那新兴导入型的这样的一些赛道来讲的话，其实很重要的一点就是要看到这个行业未来的一个打开空间和它的一个壁垒到底有多高。那比如说我们现在能够看到的桂花鱼、牛蛙、小龙虾，其实基本上都属于这样的一个新兴导入型的一个赛道。虽然牛蛙和小龙虾其实已经发展有几年了，但是目前来讲的话，它整个的一个增长其实依然是相对比较可观的。那从这样的一个品种来看的话，衍生到产业链当中，其实就包括整个产业链当中的一个养殖、饲料以及这个相关的这样的一些下游的一个央储类的这样一些加工的一个赛道。那这新兴导入型的这个投资，其实非常跟这个周期交替型和稳定增长型有非常大的一个区别。它的一个很重要的特点就是说，风险其实是非常高的。当然，就是因为考虑到它未来成长的空间是非常大的，所以整体的一个向上的一个成长性其实是非常强，所以基本上是高风险高收益的这样的一个情况。这个是我们总结的中国水产产业链从这个我们投资者的一个角度上来讲，如何去细化不同的投资的一个属性，那在每一种属性之下，如何做一个很好的这样一个投资决策的这样的一个建议。那我这边的一个分享就主要是包括这样一些内容。那后面的话再看大家有什么问题，我们可以进行一个线上的一个互动交流。好，谢谢主持人。
Thank you, Sho. Unfortunately, Sho Chen's not going to be able to join us for the Q&A session this evening. But again, if you'd like to see the PowerPoint, we have it translated into English and have it at the website. Okay, George Banau is our next speaker. He's managing partner and co-founder at Hatch. George is a molecular biotechnologist with a background in synthetic biology and biofuels research. In addition to founding Hatch, George founded Plastic Fisher, which cleans up plastic in Asian rivers, and also founded a renewable energy company in Ghana. At Hatch, George is in charge of all investment-related activities and Hatch strategy. Hatch's portfolio currently consists of 37 investments across nutrition, technology, health and genetics, and alternative seafood. Initial investments range from 200,000 to 3 million euros. Thanks, George, for joining us today, and we'll pass it over to you now.
Hello, everyone. My name is George Baunach. I'm managing partner and co-founder at Hatch. Hatch invests along the aquaculture supply chain. We have made investments in feed ingredients, in health solutions, in software and hardware startups. We also invested in genetic diagnostics and spend a bit of our capital on alternative proteins. In relation to feed ingredients, we have made investments in the specialty feed sector, and we have also, or specialty feed ingredients, and we have also made one bulk feed investment. Maybe that's the most interesting for this audience. It's a company called Montana Microbial Products. We invested in 2019. The company since then went on to set up two plants, one in northern US and one in Europe. In both cases, this is in a joint venture agreement or in a license agreement with a large industrial player, because obviously it involves significant capex spending. And the Northern American plant is looking to produce about 15,000 tons of annual product, and the European plant is looking to produce between 50 and 60,000 tons of product. The product is a barley protein concentrate. So the innovation is to up concentrate barley from an original fairly low protein content of 16% to a protein content which makes it competitive with soy protein concentrate. It also has shown to be very digestible, well, no anti-nutritional factors, great performance in feeding trials. So this kind of innovation is very interesting for us, because within a short amount of time, we're able to bring a meaningful amount of new feed ingredients to the market. It could be about, in the EU, it could be about 10% of the soy protein concentrate imports, which would obviously be a meaningful full amount. I think and that generally talks a little bit about the philosophy we have at Hatch. We want these ingredients to make a difference in the aquafeed market. And for most feed manufacturers, it means that there needs to be a consistent, large enough supply of that product throughout the year. If then, most of you are aware about the challenges of scaling those new feed ingredients. In our analysis, it's very important to have access to these to the supply streams, to in most cases waste streams, and very often that means that the innovation needs to tap into the agricultural sector, waste products from that sector, in our opinion, bear the potential to provide additional protein for the aquafeed market, and therefore reducing the reliance on some of the other feed ingredient or ingredients that are currently used. So in addition to that, we also invested in some specialty ingredients like a natural astaxanthin production, but that's probably not within the scope of this discussion. So we are extremely keen on new ingredients. We unfortunately are not seeing a huge amount of new innovations. We would love for it to be more. Personally, we think the up concentration process, tapping into agricultural waste streams, maybe with single cell proteins, is a good approach. In the insect protein space, we have not invested, mainly because we were when we started, we did not have enough capital to make meaningful contributions. That has changed, but still we think there's enough capital in that space and that we don't have to necessarily invest. So when looking at these new innovations, we typically look at the cost structure, at of course the product specifications. We then look at the scalability, the US dollar per kg production capacity that need to go into building or setting up those systems. So anything that can retrofit existing assets is typically great. Anything that can use off-the-shelf components or generally keep the capex low is favorable, and not trying to invent the wheel or reinvent the wheel too much in terms of the processes that are needed. From our perspective, we can definitely advise companies that are scaling up solutions to talk to feed manufacturers really early on, really understand clearly what they are looking for in terms of the level of detail on the trial side, basically so that the startups or the companies can go and conduct the trials that at the end of the day also are going to convince the feed companies to include the ingredients in the diet, or at least start trialing them themselves. And we have seen multiple times that trials are not executed in the right way. So that's a really costly error, because it means that then the trial might not be conclusive. Then the company needs to go back and redo the trial with a research organization, and that can take months and often also more product for testing than the company has. So paying very close attention to who to try with, supervising the trial setup, getting maybe a consultant in to advise on the trial setup is something that we definitely recommend. And then of course, as much work as possible to go into the techno-economic model, to really understand all the assumptions there, to reduce the amount of uncertainty about how to scale those type of technologies up. We as investors, we love to see a good techno-economic model with proven assumptions or validated assumptions. We love to see very clear product sheets and well-documented trial data. And then lastly, I would say a plan to a feasible financial structure in the future. In most cases, it's not feasible to own and operate all assets for a young company. At least that makes it hard for us to invest as investors, because it means there will be a lot of dilution. So if there's a smart way to finance, maybe through license, holdco and opco relationships, or through bringing in non-dilutive funding early on, or strong strong industrial partners. That's one piece of advice we can also give, because that definitely would make it an attractive value proposition for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Lots of great advice there. We really appreciate that. Okay, our next speaker is Kate Danaher. She's the Managing Director of Oceans and Seafood for S2G Ventures. Kate specializes in structuring capital, facilitating syndications, and providing resources to enable businesses to scale while preserving their mission. Prior to S2G Ventures, Kate was the Chief Lending Officer for RSF Social Finance. S2G Ventures is a multi-stage venture fund investing across the food, agriculture, oceans, and seafood markets. They invest in seed to Series B companies with initial investments ranging from $500,000 to $5 million. And they also sometimes form partnerships with their companies. We're excited to hear more about S2G investments. And Kate, please.
Hi, my name's Kate Danaher. I'm a managing director at S2G Ventures Ocean Fund. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to share a little bit about S2G and our Oceans Fund and what we're investing in, and a little bit of our perspective on fish feed and novel ingredients and how that plugs into the greater needs of our oceans and seafood. So I am going to share my screen and get started. So S2G Ventures started in 2014 with its first fund focused on food and agriculture, land-based food and agriculture, which invested behind the belief that food needed to be produced in a way that considered human and environmental health alongside taste and profits. This thesis continues to drive S2G's investments today, and we're on our third food and agriculture fund. And as of about a year ago, we stood up our first Oceans Fund. In terms of the Ocean Fund thesis, we see that climate-related impacts on the oceans, increasing resource limitations due to overfishing, and increased consumer demand on seafood are converging to create opportunities. The friction created by the convergence of these issues is where innovation is emerging and where S2G Oceans plans to make its investments. Based on the macro trends I just mentioned, we've identified 3 pillars that we aim to address through our investment strategy. The first is ecosystem resilience. Marine resources such as algae and coral reefs are the foundation of life and regulate the planet's climate. Preservation and restoration of marine ecosystems is paramount. The second is resource optimization. An abundance of potential exists from the finite resources of our oceans. We believe that responsible production and integrating efficiencies that maximize the value of the resources can meet human needs while supporting the resilience of our ocean ecosystems. The third is consumer centricity. Increase consumer awareness about the health benefits of marine resources, the role oceans play in stabilizing our climate, and the general awareness of the state of our oceans is beginning to drive consumer buying decisions. We feel like finally the consumer really is ready to play a role in some of these solutions. We believe that investing in these pillars in silos is inefficient and ultimately ineffective. Although it is sometimes unavoidable, S2G aims to take an integrated systems approach to our investing such that more than one pillar is addressed in each of our investments. So with this framework, S2G invests broadly across multiple sectors in the oceans arena. If we attempt to look at this linearly, on the left and move right, we start in the ocean and move through seafood production, ocean supply chains, and consumer-driven opportunities as we move to the right. We believe that investing across the pillars and throughout the supply chain gives us unique insights into the needs and opportunities that would be difficult to uncover in this very global, opaque, and complicated sector. Our ultimate goal is to improve the performance of ocean-related industries, introduce novel solutions, and reduce information asymmetry to improve decision-making. In terms of mechanics, we're a 15-year fund, which is taking a slightly longer view than the traditional venture capital fund. We do this because we recognize the investment in our oceans is still very nascent, and the life cycle of these companies relies heavily on the natural cycles of our oceans and seafood. And so a 15-year cycle fund, just feels like the right amount of time to give some of these companies more of an opportunity to build momentum. Our clock started on January 1st of 2021. So we have a 3-year investment period, and we're at the very beginning of that. We invest in seed to Series B companies or stage, and our initial check size ranges from about 500,000 up to 5 million, and we reserve to follow on and be a partner with our companies. To date, we've made 5 investments across these sectors: oceans data and IoT, software fintech, alternative feed, production innovation, and vaccines and therapeutics. I'll walk through 3 of our investments that illustrate our point of view on the feed and novel ingredient sector that we think is most relevant to this audience. So the first is aquatic protein. Aquatic protein falls into our alternative feed and production innovation sectors. The company holds a proprietary zero-waste fish meal and oil production technology, which converts low-worth inputs into high-value products. The first product focuses on the remediation of the invasive Asian carp population in the Midwest River Basin, which has become a tremendous problem, and turns that into a high-end fish meal and oil. That application, the technology application, the hope is that we can use that for other invasive species that can be turned into a high resource premium product. The second company is Viaqua, which sits in our therapeutics and vaccination sector. Viaqua is a biotechnology company and developer of an orally administered RNA particle platform that fights viral diseases and promotes the overall health of aquatic species. Their first product will target white spot shrimp, otherwise known as WSSV. The company has the potential to use this technology, however, to apply it across multiple aquatic species where cost-effective oral delivery is absolutely necessary. The last company is Real Data, which sits in our software and fintech sector. Real Data is the first company to apply its assistive artificial intelligence work solely on the burgeoning land-based aquaculture industry, also known as RAS. By leveraging underwater computer vision technology, Real Data provides critical insights to inform optimal fish farming operations. One of the main value propositions of the Real Data product is that it can optimize feed regimes and RAS systems that reduces waste, saves money, and monitors the health of the fish. So finally, we believe aquaculture plays an important role in the future of our oceans and seafood, but it needs to be better. We approach feed and novel ingredients as one important solution in improving the sector, but beyond feed, we believe that we have to invest in all of the enabling technologies that improve the performance of the aquaculture industry. Looking forward over the next year, we're seeing increased opportunities in the sectors in the dark blue. And this is where we believe we'll be making our investments over the next 6 to 12 months, although we're always looking for any opportunities in any of the sectors that you can see on this page. I really appreciate your time. I'm really excited to hear some of the questions that you have for us.
Thank you very much, Kate. Lots of information there. Good stuff. Okay, thank you. Our next final speaker is Mike Vellings. Mike is the co-founder and managing partner at Aquaspark. He's a lifelong entrepreneur and has spent decades jump-starting a range of successful businesses. Among other ventures, he co-founded Connexie, which has helped catalyze a professional employment industry across the Netherlands. And today, Mike is here to talk about Aquaspark, a global investment fund that makes investments in sustainable aquaculture businesses. Aquaspark invests in Series A companies with follow-on investments. Average initial investments range from $2.5 to $5 million. So let's hear from Mike on Aquaspark's investment strategies and advice for aquafeed ingredient companies. Mike, good to see you again.
Hello, I'm Mike Vellings, and I'm here to talk to you about Aquaspark and investing in the future of aquaculture. So our mission is to move the aquaculture towards more healthy, sustainable, and affordable practices, while showing that that's actually better for your returns. And in doing that, we have a few focal areas, such as sustainable farming operations, tech solutions, alternative feed ingredients, of which we're talking today, animal welfare, genetics to keep diversity and improve efficiencies, finance platforms, etc. We are building a global portfolio of 50 to 60 companies that demonstrates this principle that sustainable practices are better for business than doing things in a more traditional way. And we're currently at a speed where we invest about 80 to 120 million euro on an annual basis, of which 50% goes into existing portfolio and the rest goes into into new companies. We typically invest fairly early. What we call proof of concept. Generally, that's comparable with a Series A type stage, sometimes a little later, sometimes a little earlier, depending on what type of technology it is. And we then do follow-on investments all the way to maturity. No exit focus, really creating long-term partnerships, like a long-term holding company. And we are 22 companies today, growing quite rapidly. And if you count the companies that are represented in Hatch, one of our long-term portfolio partners, and we're talking about an ecosystem of about 60 companies in total. Our current AUM is 212 million euro. We expect that to cross 300 million before the end of this year. As you can see from these graphs, our fund has been performing quite nicely so far. We're really looking for companies that solve a real problem, that have synergy with our portfolio, a collaborative attitude, and that really want to embark on this long-term journey together with us to create the best possible aquaculture. These are some of our portfolio companies. As you can see, it's a very diverse range, from farming operations to technology, to genetics, to animal welfare, to disease battling, and so on. And since we're talking about feed, for us, the goal with feed is to really improve the sustainability of feed in a vastly way, and try to influence that as much as possible. And in our opinion, that means replacing fish meal and fish oil, but also other ingredients like soy. And the global carbon footprint of agriculture is about 30% of our global carbon emissions. And half of that, so 15% of our global carbon emissions, are related to land use change that are related to agriculture. Half of the, that 15% is basically mostly palm oil and soy, deforestation. And we think that really needs to change and is just as harmful as fish meal and fish oil is to our oceans. We think finding really great alternatives for the long term could come from single cell proteins, microbes, insects, algae, fungi, and other promising alternatives. And we get the most excited by things that have a potential to become really long-term bulk ingredients with a much smaller footprint than what we have today, that are at the same time healthier for our animals. And thus healthier for humans as well. But we also invest in smaller feed additives for smaller elements that really improve sustainability of feed, or in new technology to make feed or distribute feed. There's many elements to feed besides the ingredients itself. Some examples of companies in our portfolio that are in feed are Calista, for example, California-based. This is a rendering of our future plant in China that we're currently building. It's supposed to come online in Q4 2022. Protex, the world's largest insect producer. This is a picture of their farm, their insect farm in the Netherlands. Already exporting to quite a few countries. We're gearing up for international expansion in the middle of a funding round to do that. Molofeed, which is an example of something completely different. It's a company that developed a new technology to make microencapsulated feed, so the smallest particles while keeping all the nutritional value of the ingredients. replacing, for example, Artemia, which makes aquaculture more sustainable, and at the same time also brings down the entry barrier for fish farming. Another different example is C6 Energy. It's a seaweed company based in Indonesia. They're also, in India. They're also active in Indonesia. And they found a way to really grow seaweed at a massive scale, do wet processing. And one of their products is a feed additive for aquaculture. As an advice to those of you in the feed ingredient space that are looking for investors, our experience is that generally being in the business of producing feed ingredients, alternative feed ingredients, you have a long road ahead of you. It's generally very capital intensive, which makes it very important to pick the right investors. Don't go to strategics too early. And find investors that have a long-term horizon and that don't put a lot of exit pressure on you too early. And make sure that you have a whole group of investors that are not necessarily related to each other. So you're not dependent on just one or two entities. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. And I'm very much looking forward to the Q&A later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. We appreciate that. Okay, we appreciate all of the presentations, in fact. Now I'd like to ask our panelists if you'd turn on your videos and just briefly introduce yourselves again before we begin the Q&A session. And for the audience members, please don't forget to type your questions into the Q&A box so that we can address them during the Q&A session here. All right, so Matt, why don't you go first, if you would?
Sure, I'm Matt Mulrennan. I was the first up in this list. I'm the CEO of Invest. It's an environmental investing membership organization. We have several people on the call who've been involved with us in the past. Yeah, we have an annual summit coming up in November in San Francisco.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Lisa, why don't you go next, please?
Hi, I'm Lisa Rich with Hemisphere Ventures and separately with a space company called Explore. We are based in the Seattle area, and if there are space investors here, that's a whole separate conversation I'm happy to have. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa. Alex, with IndieBio, please go ahead.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Alex. I'm one of the partners at IndieBio. We're an early stage bio and deep tech program-based fund across human and planetary health. So we're actually right now kind of in the tail end of recruiting our 12th cohort. So any startups, please reach out.
All right. Thank you. And Kate, please.
Sure. Hi, Kate Danaher, Managing Director at S2G Ventures, the New Oceans Fund. Nice to meet you all. I'm based in San Francisco, California. Yeah, look forward to hearing your questions.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And George, please.
Sorry. George Baunach, Managing Partner at Hedge. Very happy to be here. Yeah, and looking forward to the conversation. I think it's such an important thing that you do, and yeah, putting an emphasis on this challenge.
Thank you, George. Appreciate it. And Mike. Michael, you ready? There you go.
Yes, I am. So yeah, thank you for having me. I'm Mike, one of the managing partners and co-founders of Aquaspark, and excited for the Q&A. And if you are looking for an investment, we would love to hear from you.
Okay, thanks. So I've got a list of questions here. So the first one is for Matt. The question is Invest investing in the European Union?
Yeah, we definitely.
A Swedish startup that develops a new aquaculture technique is asking. Okay.
Yeah, short answer is yes. We've had companies represented internationally. We had 8 countries represented last year. We've had a few funds from the EU, some pretty major funds. Demeter is one of them out of Paris, and the UK. So we've had a few. We are trying to grow, but it is an in-person conference. If you're comfortable with that, with the travel, that's important. But we have had international focus, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next question for Lisa. What is your process for evaluating whether companies meet your investment criteria?
Yeah, well, our process is starting with the credible founding teams, and IndieBio is one of our friends of the Hemisphere family, and largely because of their vetting process, where we're looking at teams that have already had this, PhD research that's gone on and ability to help us vet the quality and capabilities of a company. So we start with that of what has the company done to show us that they're credible to start the conversation. And then what are they doing in terms of non-dilutive funding that they can achieve? Because it's the grants or the opportunities with maybe organizations in the US like the National Science Foundation, where we're seeing an effort made to advance research in a non-dilutive way. And we tend to appreciate that in addition to working with accelerators if it's an area that we're not as familiar with.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, this one is for Alex. I think you answered, but we'll let you get some more detail. Cell-based bluefin tuna, did you hear that right? Can you explain your investment further?
Oh, sure. And yeah, this is actually one that co-invested with Lisa on. That was Finless Foods. It was one of the early companies in the space, and I think there's a couple of angles from it. First, just purely around sustainability within aquaculture. I think we're definitely firm believers in the industry in the traditional sense, and also see there's a lot of potential for ways to be really sustainable beyond that. And one is with species that are hard to cultivate, like bluefin tuna, have issues around kind of long life cycles and mercury buildup. So health concerns for individuals. We kind of see, and also finding ways to disintermediate the ocean at times from the consumer. So can we make bluefin tuna in downtown Chicago or in the middle of Europe or elsewhere? So I think we've kind of bet pretty broadly on new ways of making, especially protein around the world. And I think that was, bluefin tuna is kind of a starting species that for a number of reasons I mentioned, but I think technology can advance to a lot of other proteins.
Okay, good, thank you. So this next question, we've got a couple of them that are pretty similar, so I'm gonna kind of merge them here for you. This is kind of for everybody. Basically we've got a lot of people from India who are listening in on the webinars. And so the question is, have you done any investments in India-based aquaculture companies? What's your criteria for this market? So this is just kind of for everybody. If anybody's had any investments in India, if you might highlight that for our audience. Oh, maybe not.
No, that's just
Mike should start.
Oh, no, go ahead, George. Yeah, you go first.
George.
So I think I was just waiting for Mike to unmute or not. Yeah, we have made 1 or 2 investments in India. The most successful is a company called Aquaconnect. They work with the shrimp farm industry, which is attractive for international investors, in our opinion, because it has a large size. Just one local market is in itself able to, really carry the one startup to quite a decent size. And then, of course, there are also international expansion plans. criteria for us, I mean, they're a bit practical because we maybe don't necessarily have the right cultural understanding or the background. So we have an Indian person on our team, yeah, but still we would be looking for deep cultural and customer understanding within the founding team. And then, of course, also a approach that is unique, is also commercially protectable, maybe as a business model, because enforcement of IP protection rights might not be so strong for us. So yeah, and as always, generally a strong team to run this.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, Mike, please.
Yeah, we actually just made an investment in India in C6, the one that was in our presentation, the seaweed company. It's a biotech company, basically. And we have a number of other companies in our portfolio that are actually active in India, like Expertsea, Proteon with bacteriophages based therapy products for disease battling, alternative to antibiotics. And actively looking at other companies and together with Hatch independently. And for us, we also have some practical requirements, and we are a little bit later than, for example, Hatch typically look a bit more for already established companies, in the sense that you can still be a startup, but have proof of concept. It's more like a Series A type stage, a little bit later than when you're just starting. But any company that's really solving something in aquaculture that wants to partner long term, we're interested and would love to get to know you.
Thank you.
I can jump in quick here. IndieBio, we invest quite globally. I think of our 160 companies, around 40% have international founders. From India, we've done a number, not in aquaculture, but we've done a soil microbiome company, a company doing synthetic biology using fungal fermentation, and then a company doing cell and gene therapy, so more on the human health side of things.
Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so we've got another question here for Kate. You listed alternative ingredients, feed ingredients, as one of your investment priorities for the next 6 to 12 months. Is S2G interested in any particular ingredients, and what criteria are you looking for in those ingredients?
Sure. So there are a few areas that we're particularly interested in, and we're just coming up to speed. So we're very interested in algae, microalgae or macroalgae as a feed ingredient. And also, I mean, there's feed ingredients, but there's a lot of applications for algae and microalgae. So also for human consumption. We've recently started exploring natural astaxanthin as an ingredient, a feed ingredient, and we are still trying to figure out where we land on which insects we are most excited about. We're newer to the feed side than everybody else on this call. So if anybody has thoughts on which insect will win, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, very good. Okay, for Alex, here's one regarding your vertical oceans, how the idea came up, and also what are the benefits to have such a vertical farm?
Sure, yeah, so that's a company we funded out of Singapore. I think the idea from the entrepreneur side of things was it was a pretty experienced operator who actually had a pretty big background in scaling insect farming, and then spent a fair amount of time consulting around operations within shrimp aquaculture and seeing what he thought were issues around sustainability. So the idea there is to first being when you compare vertical farming of shrimp versus typical vertical farming of lettuce and other greens and stuff, shrimp has I think like 12 to 15x value. So you're getting the company can actually have a lot more revenue and margins. And the other idea is really building a fully enclosed system that's mostly automated and self-regulating. You can monitor temperature, actually have feed that grows in the system and it's coming to the shrimp, self-cleaning for the most part, and by shortening the supply chain, and again going to places that don't have easy access to premium shrimp, you can kind of win new markets that just don't have that possibility.
Okay, good, thank you. Mike, here's another one for you. Your advice to ingredient companies was to find a group of investors that are not necessarily related. Do you recommend that ingredient companies diversify their revenue streams? And for instance, making an alternative protein that can work in both aquaculture feeds and human nutrition?
I think it's always a good idea to make sure that you have some diversification. Human nutrition is often harder than animal nutrition. If you talk about legislation, approvals, etc., depending on what kind of product you're producing, of course. So if you would diversify, I would probably first go for some alternative animals, like poultry, or depending on the product again, or piglets or something like that, pet feed, before you go to humans. I do think it is very wise to diversify and not be dependent on just one revenue stream, just one investor or just one client. It's a problem for many companies that 80% of your revenue typically comes from 20% of your clients, and the same goes for products, sectors, etc. And the more you diversify, the more you and the more resilient you'll be for future shocks in the market.
Okay, good, thank you. So Kate, somebody picked up on some of your last comments. With your outlook on microalgae and using synthetic biology to re-engineer it and sustainably produce nutrients of interest, is re-engineering these cells an issue, and would it have lots of hesitation in becoming a source of feed?
I think that if you're talking about the GMO issue, I think that is going to be
I think that's what they're getting at, yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly going to be a regulatory issue. I think several people that we have talked to don't necessarily believe that from a health perspective, whether it's aquatic health or animal health, there is a big issue with GMO. It's just getting it through the regulatory pathway, and depending on the market that you're going into. So yes, that's definitely a huge consideration.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Alex, this is one for you, but I think it may apply to a couple different people actually. Can you talk about what long-term partnerships look like after companies go through your accelerator program? What is SOSV looking for in terms of long-term partners?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say there's kind of the traditional long-term partner, which is continuing to invest, and the majority, 80% of our main fund, which is about 275 million, in a growth fund, go to investing in companies all the way, through growth stages. I think the more important part for us is traditionally we've been an in-person focused program because we have biosafety level 1 and 2 labs in our space, as well as kind of builder space and office. Now we're hybrid in-person and remote. So, we spend 4 to 6 months in person with people in the same office every day, kind of working on their company. So really the long-term is kind of the relationship. And we tend to be, we spend that 6 months with people troubleshooting. And then for the rest of the life of the company, we, visit their lab, we troubleshoot with them when they have challenges, help them hire people, help them raise money. So it's just building a long-term relationship where we can help the founders as much as they want and need, and also kind of be part of the larger community. I think we have, with 160 companies, probably 500 plus founders. So it's also a really rich network of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good, thank you. Lisa, I know you guys do kind of long-term stuff too as well. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just the comment about the network is really valuable because it's allowed us to develop our own network of domain experts around the world, nationally and internationally. So we are, getting inputs from what's happening in Singapore in synthetic biology, what's happening in India, Argentina. We love having that awareness because then we can help founders find partners, and that cohesion in the emerging markets is really important. We always recommend that founders are seeking partnerships where they can grow their capabilities with other early emerging companies. So it can be a good way for companies to grow faster, is finding good partners where they're all learning together and growing together. There's I think a lot of that synergy that happens at IndieBio, which we love, and happens between some of our companies as well, in some ways that you wouldn't expect. Putting a founder that's at even the example I gave of a company that's Finless Foods, getting them to put their cells on the space station involved connecting them with the space industry, which they wouldn't have thought of before. Some of these microalgae companies may find in speaking with Hemisphere that there's actually a space opportunity for research that they hadn't thought of that could advance the company, not necessarily distract them, but find a whole new avenue and a vertical for the future.
Great, thank you. George, you mentioned paying attention to feed trial details, and you probably know F3, we've been doing quite a few of our own here. So any advice on conducting small-scale pilot studies with new alternative feeds and any industrial partner that can help with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think on the industrial partners, first, I would say that you have to be a bit careful if you work with them on verifying your ingredients, because they might keep the information or the details confidential. So you might get a result which is, yes, we're interested in your product, or we're not, and which in itself, of course, is a great sign. Yeah, but you don't get all the details of the trial unless you negotiate that with them, and which is, especially if you're very early, maybe not even what you want to do, because also if you have a non-optimum result and you feel like you can improve on it, then you maybe don't want yet to go there. So if it's really about early stages, I think go, and I can help you with that. We have a list of those companies and organizations, and you go there, you check if they have done similar trials before, you check what their reputation is. Of course, you try to compare a little bit what they're charging, and I think very through that process you can work out if they're going to give you what you need, and you can ask for examples of previous trials they have done and the documentation they have provided afterwards.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, it appears we have one of our, or more, but people asking, would like to know if the presenters have investments in South America, specifically in manufacturing of insect meal areas, and your perspective in investing in Latin America. And it's to everybody.
Yeah, go. Maybe I can go real quick while I'm still on it. Now, we have made investments in Latin America, but not in the insect feed market. I think there are a couple of species that are very interesting, a couple of larger domestic markets, of course, Chile with the salmon industry and also some bivalves, Ecuador with the shrimp industry, and Brazil is really up and coming also for tilapia. For example, Aquaspark has invested there. So we think of Latin America as an attractive market, but we have not invested in insect feeds there.
Yeah, Kate, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't have anything to add to that.
Oh,
We also
okay.
we have looked at a few. I mean, I will say that we have looked at a few companies, feed companies in South America. It's interesting, given their climate and depending on the feedstock, it is actually a pretty interesting place to develop a alternative feed company. But we haven't gotten into like deep due diligence on any of them.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought that Brazil, not only in tilapia, but shrimp and so many other things, with the water resources they've got there, the population, the land, I think Brazil is the only place that could ever even get close to the production that China has. And it is growing very quickly. And they've got, an interesting mix of population and low land costs, low labor costs in the Northeast, and then a lot of investment capital and highly educated, well-to-do consumers in the South. So, they can, I think, someday play a pretty big role and be not that far behind China if they really put their mind to it. Mike, did you have something else to add?
No, there's indeed great potential. And as George mentioned, we invested in tilapia in Brazil. We've been looking at a number of other opportunities. Haven't been able to make another investment yet, but will at some point. I'm convinced. But and a host of our companies are active in Ecuador related to shrimp. But it takes a while to really build that portfolio. We've also looked at a number of insect opportunities in South America, but also haven't made an investment yet.
Okay, good. Well, we're about almost out of time here, so let me just ask one last question. As you all know, we at F3 are challenging the industry through our contest to innovate fish-free alternatives for aquafeed. But what do you see as the future for alternative aquafeed investments? So why don't we start with Alex, please, and we'll just go around and everybody take a crack at it.
Sure. That's a big question. I mean, Yeah, I think we've looked at it from a number of different angles. I think one area we are really interested in, and we haven't placed many bets on, is in the micro and macroalgae space. So it's something we're looking at both for aquaculture and other uses. But I think the other is I think we still are really deep believers in fermentation. Also, I think there's a lot of unexplored biodiversity in microbes from both land, water, and we're seeing that. We've had a number of applications in areas outside of aquaculture, but I think in terms of better nutrition, more bioavailable nutrients, and maybe novel feeds to improve nutrition as well as kind of medicines, that's an area we really like and spend a lot of time in. So yeah, that'd be off the top of my head.
All right, thank you. Lisa, please.
Yeah, well, I think we're looking at the cost of production being reduced for these micronutrients and novel ways to reduce cost of production and find new efficiencies. So it's not just the innovation on that side, but then the business model, as Mike had addressed, the large CapEx need that's required. How can companies innovate to get to a commercial capability faster? There's a lot of creativity involved in that business thinking, and that's what we look for with new companies.
Thank you. Matt, please.
Yeah, we had a great company called Beta Hatch that came through doing mealworms, and that applied to multiple sectors beyond fish farming as well. And they got a pretty sizable investment. So that was a really cool one. I'm interested in the IP around kelp-based feed and some other new things that are coming online. I think the aquaculture industry in the United States is just starting, and there's a lot of opportunity to create a patent around some of these new interesting feed sources from plants and insects. So. Yeah, so we're all the above on all of it. Really interested in the feed systems as well, and the efficiencies in growing fish quicker and understanding their growth rates and the optimization at the facilities as well for actual aquaculture facilities. So we do all the above.
Okay, good, thank you. And George.
Yeah, I would pick up something that Mike said in his introduction. I think the trend towards alternative to the bulk ingredients, towards soy, purely also from an industry need perspective. Yeah, the salmon industry is really living up to their Scope 3 emissions, so their land usage change impact, and so when you launched F3, it was really a lot of the industry was looking at the marine ingredients, but I think now it's coming also to the land-based ingredients, and I'm very supportive of that, but I think it will be a challenge because aquafeed is already very expensive compared to other animal protein feeds. So I think we really need to find large-scale alternatives without driving the price even higher, because then the seafood won't be a really viable alternative for many demographies. So yeah, that's my trend analysis.
Thank you. Kate, please.
I think from an investor's perspective, feed companies, they're very CapEx intensive. They take a very long time to get to market, usually through a very large feed company, of which there are only a handful. It's a very hard road. And so I think one of the things that always interests us, as in venture capital, you're always looking at TAM and kind of the acceleration to scale. And so companies or ingredients who have all, other industries and other verticals that they also can pivot into, we find very attractive, because they can oftentimes get on a faster track with one industry that enables them to then, buys them a little bit of time or build some revenues to kind of chart the path for the feed side of the business. So that's something that we always find pretty interesting.
All right, thank you. And Mike.
Yeah, I'd like to echo George. We also think that we need other alternatives, not just for fish meal and fish oil, but also for land-based ingredients, because we think soy, and even though you could, a lot of parties are trying to buy soy sustainably, that pushes other people into less sustainable soy. We have a limited quantity, and the growth of the aquaculture industry, just in sheer amount of ingredients, would have to double the global soy industry for everything. That's just not a viable option. So we're most excited about things that have the potential to become a really big bulk ingredient, and then have a host of other bulk ingredients, so we don't have dependency on just a few ingredients. Those things are hard to find, especially in a cost-effective manner, as George said. Soy is really cheap. Derived products are a bit more expensive, but it's still, the bar is not very high, which means that it's a very tough nut to crack, and it takes billions, if not trillions, to really come up with the volume by 2050 to have a completely different feed. And we think that if we do crack that nut, and we do come up with a feed that is, for example, a mix of insects, different types of insects, there's plenty of space for everybody. A mix of insects, single cell protein, seaweeds, microalgae, in a cost-effective way, not using any land, not using any fresh water, or in a very limited way. And we can actually produce plenty of food at a very low cost in a very healthy way for probably double the population that we are ever going to have on this planet. But it really requires a radical transformation of how we look at animal feed, and all the current solutions are not going to be sufficient. Even though we totally understand where everybody comes from, there's no other alternative today. we really need to get behind this together, because it's as Kate just said, it's a very hard road. But we are the ones that together that can create a lighthouse and start the paths that then can be treaded by others.
All right, good. Well, thank you. Thank all of you. We really appreciate it. And I really appreciate everybody here getting on very late at night or really early in the morning hours for all the panelists here today. But our global audience, which was just short of 25,900 people, obviously most of them watching from Asia, but we all really appreciate the great discussions and great advice you had to share with us. So we've really enjoyed hosting these monthly webinars and hope that they've been informative for everyone and that they're inspiring our audience across the aquaculture industry and seafood sector. Because we've had such great feedback on these seminars, we've decided to continue them starting again next year. So if you've not done so already, please join our F3 mailing list. Check in at the f3meeting.com to receive updates and see information, PowerPoints from earlier presentations. All that is at that same site. So thank you again for joining us for the seminar today. Take care. We'll see all of you next year, if not sooner. Before you go, please take a couple of minutes to watch our closing video from the F3 team. And thank you all once again. Mike, thanks to everybody at Aquaspark. Give my best regards.
Thank you. And well, I hope we'll see you in person again soon.
I hope so soon. It would really be nice. Take care. Say